Dawson City, Yukon Territory. February 1897, it's 43 degrees below zero, and the ground is harder than tempered steel. 3,000 prospectors' men who sold everything they owned, who hauled a year's worth of supplies over the Chilcut Pass on their backsar, standing over shallow pits in the frozen earth, staring at an enemy that won't move. Permafrost, not the seasonal frost that California miners knew. Not snow you could melt with a campfire. This is geological concrete. Soil that has been frozen solid for 10,000 years, locked at depths of 15 to 20 feet where the gold-bearing gravel sits on bedrock. The stakes? $160 million in gold, adjusted to today's value. Over $5 billion is buried under this frozen wasteland. But none of it matters if you can't dig, and they can't dig. The Klondike Gold Rush, the greatest mineral stampede in human history, is about to collapse before it even begins. Because the men who came here with picks and shovels are learning a brutal truth in the Yukon winter. A pickaxe bounces off frozen ground like it's striking granite. You can swing all day and barely chip a divote. The official solution, the only method. Anyone knows is a medieval nightmare called fire setting. Here's how it works. You descend into your shaft at dusk. You gather driftwood, kindling, whatever scraps of timber you can scavenge from the surrounding forest. You build a fire at the bottom of your pit tin, 12 feet down in a narrow, suffocating hole. You let it burn for 6 to 8 hours while you sit topside in a canvas tent, trying not to freeze to death. By morning, if you're lucky, the fire has melted 12 inches of gravel. 12 inches. You shovel it out, haul it to the surface in a bucket on a rope, and then you do it again. Every single night, it takes a man 3 months to dig a 20-foot shaft this way. 3 months of breathing smoke and carbon monoxide in a confined space. 3 months of risking tunnel collapse because uneven heating fractures the permafrost. 3 months to reach bedrock, where you might find a paste-strake of gold-bearing gravel, or you might find nothing. And if you brought a year's supply of food, you've just burned through a quarter of it digging one hole. The math is catastrophic. Most men won't make it. They'll run out of supplies, abandon their claims, and either die on the trail back to Skagway, or spend the winter in Dawson eating sawdust bread and waiting for the spring thaw. The engineers, the experts shipped in from San Francisco and Seattle look at the problem and declare it unsolvable. You can't mine permafrost in winter, they say. It's thermodynamically impossible. The ground is too cold, the fuel supply too limited, the conditions too hostile. They recommend suspending all operations until May. But May is 7 months away, and the men standing over these frozen pits didn't mortgage their homes and cross 1,000 miles of wilderness to wait 7 months. They need a solution, and they need it. Now, enter Clarence Berry. He's not an engineer. He's not a geologist. He's a fruit farmer from Fresno, California, who arrived in the Klondike in 1896 with his wife Ethel and a dream of getting rich. He got lucky early staked a claim on El Dorado Creek that turned out to be one of the richest in the territory, but he's no different from the other 10,000 men, clawing at frozen ground except for one thing. Clarence Berry is a tinkerer. Before he came north, he worked as a ranch hand, a blacksmith's apprentice, a mill operator. He understands machinery. He understands steam power. And when he strikes his claim on El Dorado, he doesn't do what most prospectors do, hire a crew of laborers to dig by hand. He buys a steam donkey engine. A steam donkey is a portable boiler and system. It's built for logging operations. Weighs about 2,000 pounds. Generates 40 horsepower. It's designed to drag felled timber out of forests. And that's exactly what Berry uses it for. Hauling logs to build his cabin, his sluice boxers. His timber supports for the mine shaft. It's January 1898. Berry is working his claim. The donkey engine is running, chugging along, belching steam into the sub-zero air. There's a rubber exhaust hose attached to the boiler 2 inches in diameter, 15 feet long, venting excess steam away from the engine to keep the pressure regulated. Berry has draped this hose over a pile of frozen gravel he's excavated from his shaft. He's not paying attention to it. He's focused on the winch, hauling a load of timber, and then he hears it a hissing. Sound loud, pressurized. He turns around. The exhaust hose has burned through the gravel pile and buried itself. 4 feet into the frozen earth, Barry stares at it. The hose is vertical, steaming, sunk into permafrost like a hot knife through butter. He shuts off the engine, walks over, pulls the hose out. There's a perfectly round hole in the ground, smooth-walled, still radiating heat. Barry crouches down, looks into the hole, and realizes what he's seeing. The steam, pressurized steam at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, has melted the permafrost faster than any fire could. No smoke, no toxic fumes, no risk of collapse, just heat, focused, efficient, instantaneous. He looks at the hose in his hand, and then he looks at his mineshaft. What if... If you, like us, believe that human ingenuity can solve any problem, even permafrost at 40 BO, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments what part of the world you're watching from. We're building a community of people who appreciate the kind of practical genius that changes history. Now, back to the story. Barry doesn't sleep that night. He's in his cabin sketching on the back of a supply manifest. The idea is simple, almost too simple. If escaping steam can melt for feet of permafrost by accident, what happens if you design a tool to do it on purpose? He needs 3 things. 1. A delivery pipe. Something long, narrow, and durable enough to be driven into frozen ground and withstand sustained high-pressure steam. 2. A steam source. He already has that, the Donkey engine, 40 horsepower, capable of generating steam at 15 to 20 pounds per square inch. 3. A way to focus the steam. The exhaust hose disperses steam in all directions. He needs something that concentrates it, drives it deep, melts the permafrost from the inside out. The next morning, Barry walks into Dawson City and starts buying scrap metal. There's no hardware store in Dawson in 1898. There's barely a town. What there is a junkyard of abandoned equipments, leads, stoves, tools, rifles left behind by men who gave up and went home. Barry buys a dozen old rifle barrels, lever-action Winchesters, mostly. Each barrel is 30 inches long, .44 caliber bore. He also buys welding rods, a sledgehammer, and a steel chisel tip from a blacksmith. Back at his claim, he gets to work. He takes 2 rifle barrels and welds them end to end, creating a 60-inch pipe. Then he welds another, then another. He chains 4 barrels together, creating a 10-foot steel lance. At the bottom, he welds the chisel tip sharp, tapered, designed to bite into frozen ground at the top. He fits a threaded coupling that connects to his rubber steam hose. The entire apparatus weighs maybe 20 pounds. It's crude. It looks like something a junkyard dog dragged out of a scrap heap. But the engineering is sound. Here's how it works. Barry positions the steam, point his name for it, vertically over a section of his mine shaft. He drives it into the permafrost with the sledgehammer, chisel tip first. Sinking it 12 inches deep, then he fires up the Donkey engine. The boiler heats water to 212 degrees Fahrenheit, converting it to steam. That steam travels through the rubber hose into the rifle barrel pipe, and out through the chisel tip at the bottom, at 15 pounds per square inch. The steam doesn't just warm the permafrost, it liquefies it. The superheated vapor penetrates the frozen gravel, transferring thermal energy directly into the ice crystals. The ice melts, the gravel loosens, and because the steam is under pressure, it keeps pushing deeper, melting not just the surface but the volume of soil around the pipe. Barry lets it run for 30 minutes. When he shuts off the engine and pulls the steam point out, there's a hole 3 feet deep and 6 inches wide. Filled with slurry loose gravel and meltwater, he shovels it out, and then he does it again, in 6 hours. 6 hours Barry melts and excavates 8 feet of permafrost, a process that would have taken him a week with fire setting. He completes in a single work shift. The math is staggering. A fire setting operation melts 12 inches of gravel in 8 hours. That's 1.5 inches per hour. The steam point melts 36 inches in 1 hour. That's a 2,400% increase in efficiency, and there's no smoke. No carbon monoxide. No risk of tunnel collapse from uneven heating. Barry runs the steam point for 3 days straight, driving his mine shaft down to bedrock at 22 feet. When he hits the paste rake, the gold-bearing gravel at the bottom, it's richer than anything he's seen. He fills a wheelbarrow with concentrate, washes it in a makeshift sluice, and recovers 47 ounces of gold in a single afternoon. At $16 an ounce, $18.98 prices, that's $752 in 1 day. The accidental trick just paid for itself 100 times over. Word spreads fast in a gold camp. By March 1898, every prospector in Dawson has heard about Barry's steam stick. Some think it's a miracle, others think it's a hoax. The skeptics, mostly the professional miners, who came from hard rock operations in Colorado and Montana, miss it outright. It'll never work in deep shafts, they say. The steam will dissipate. The pipe will freeze solid. It's a gimmick. But Barry isn't the only one experimenting. A miner named Anton Stander, working a claim on Bonanza Creek, builds his own steam point using salvaged boiler pipes. He drives his shaft to 30 feet, 10 feet deeper than Barry, and hits a paste rake worth 300 ounces. Another miner, Tom Lippy, modifies the design. He uses a longer pipe 14 feet and adds a pressure regulator to control the steam flow. His crew excavates a shaft in 4 days that would have taken 2 months with fire. By April, there are 50 steam points operating in the Klondike. But not everyone is celebrating. The timber merchants, the men who supply firewood for fire setting, operations see their business collapsing overnight. They start a whisper campaign. Steam points are dangerous. They'll cause cave-ins. They'll kill men. There's no evidence of this. In fact, steam points are safer than fire setting because they don't produce toxic gases or uneven heating. But fear sells, and the timber merchants have a lot to lose. Then the territorial authorities get involved. In May 1898, Canadian government, worried about safety regulations in the chaotic gold camp, sends an inspector named William Ogilvie to assess mining operations. Ogilvie is a surveyor, a bureaucrat, a man who believes in rules and standards. When he sees steam points in operation, he's horrified. These are unregulated pressure vessels, he writes in his report. They have no safety valves, no inspections, no engineering oversight. If a boiler explodes, it could kill an entire crew. He recommends banning steam points until proper standards can be established. Barry and the other miners are furious. Standards, Barry says. We're not running a factory. We're digging holes in the ground. The steam point works, saving lives, not ending them. But Ogilvie has the authority of the Crown behind him. He issues a notice. All steam-powered mining equipment must be inspected and certified by a government engineer before use. The problem? There is no government engineer in the Klondike. The nearest one is in Vancouver, 2,000 miles away. The miners ignore the notice. They keep running their steam points. They keep digging. And when Ogilvie threatens to shut down their operations, they threaten to shut down his office. We came here to mine gold, one miner tells him, not to fill out paperwork. Ogilvie backs down. He knows that if he pushes too hard, he'll have a riot on his hands. So he compromises. Steam points are allowed, but miners must keep a fire extinguisher on site and maintain their boilers. It's a token regulation, barely enforced, but it's enough to satisfy the bureaucrats in Ottawa. The steam point survives. By the winter of 1898 to 99, it's just 1 year after Barry's accidental discovery, the steam point is the standard method of mining in the Klondike. Over 2,000 steam points are operating across the goldfields. Claims that were considered worthless because they were too deep or too frozen are suddenly viable. Miners are digging shafts 50, 60, even 80 feet deep, reaching paste rakes that fire setting could never touch. The production numbers tell the story. In 1897, before the steam point, the Klondike produced approximately $1 million in gold. In 1898, with steam points in widespread use, production jumped to $10 million. In 1899, it hit $16 million. That's a 1,600% increase in 2 years. The accidental trick didn't just unlock the Klondike. It created the Klondike gold rush as we know it. Because here's the thing. Without the steam point, the rush would have fizzled out by 1898. Most miners would have given up, gone home, declared the whole venture a failure. The permafrost would have won, but Barry's discovery and the collective ingenuity of the miners who refined it turned an impossible problem into a solvable one. And the ripple effects went far beyond the Yukon. The steam point became the foundation of all cold climate mining. When gold was discovered in Nome, Alaska in 1899, miners brought steam points with them. When silver was found in the Kootenay region of British Columbia, steam points were there. By 1905, every major mining operation in the Arctic and subarctic was using some variation of Barry's design. The technology evolved. Engineers added pressure gauges, safety valves, and insulated pipes. Steam points became steam drills, then hydraulic drills, then rotary drills. But the core principle, using heat to defeat frozen ground, remained unchanged. Clarence Barry himself never patented the steam point. He didn't see it as an invention, saw it as a solution, a tool that belonged to anyone who needed it. He continued mining in the Klondike until 1900. When he sold his claims for a reported $300,000, about $9 million in today's dollars, he moved back to California, invested in oil and real estate, and lived comfortably until his death in 1930. But his legacy isn't the money, it's the lesson, the experts, the engineers, bureaucrats. The professional miners looked at permafrost and saw an insurmountable obstacle. They had their textbooks, their theories, their reasons why it couldn't be done, and then a fruit farmer with a steam donkey and a pile of scrap metal proved them wrong. He didn't invent a new technology. He didn't discover a new law of physics. He just paid attention, saw steam melting, frozen ground, and asked the question every great inventor asks, what if I did that on purpose? That's the DNA of every breakthrough in this series. Not a laboratory, not a grant, not a committee of PhDs debating the feasibility. Just a man with a problem, a tool, and the audacity to try something everyone else said was impossible. The Klondike Gold Rush produced over $500 million in gold between 1896 and 1920. But the real treasure wasn't in the ground. It was in the mind of a man who refused to accept that frozen dirt could stop him. Stories of practical genius like this are everywhere buried in history, waiting to be told. If you appreciated this deep dive into how one miner's accident changed the Arctic, subscribe for more and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We'll see you in the next one.